Hey guys, welcome to another exciting episode of Cooking Without Kidneys, here to help people who are on dialysis not just survive but thrive through food. Today I am going to be making corn arepas, pernil, and also a little bit of cotija cheese, and we're going to make a mojo. So we're going to take this all the way down to the Ecuador or a Costa Rican style of cuisine. We're going to start with our pork butt. This is what pernil is made out of. It actually translates into leg in English. So this one is bone in, and we're going to take that bone out so that way we can cut down on the cooking time. We're just going to bone this out. We really don't want to remove any of the fat, especially that top fat. How do you know where the bone is when you're taking a bone out of a piece? First off, you look at both sides. You can see that the bone comes straight through, one to the other. But more importantly, there's a fat line, okay? Where you could just literally unroll your meat. Now all this is going to get braised down together, and it's getting cooked to the point where it literally is falling apart. But essentially what we're removing is the shank, or collarbone. Rather, it is the collarbone. And you can see where the fat lines, now that I took that initial layer. Now we could do this whole with the bone in. At 325 degrees, it'll take about 6 hours. What we're looking for is to have this done in less than that, okay? The reason we were trying to do this a day ahead of time is so that way when you go on dialysis, you can just throw this into the oven and have it set and done. And I can feel the knife scraping against the bone, which is what you want. You want to get as much of that meat off of the bone as possible so you don't lose any. The cool thing is, if you want to, you could actually keep the bone and make a pork stock out of it. Okay, so that way, say you wanted to try something like a ramen or something of that nature, you actually have a base stock made already. And that will be another episode. We'll do an episode on stocks, making them yourself and how to do them low sodium. Now, I'm not a professional butcher, but just knowing a little bit of what I know about meats. Boom, boom, make sure we got all the pieces out. One more little chunk here. This is just a joint. All right. Now we're set. This will be done cooking in about 3 or 4 hours when we start it. Right back into our pan. First things first, we have our spice mix that we're going to use, using a combination of cinnamon, coriander, cumin seed, a little bay leaf, and some pepper flakes. Okay, we'll put this along both sides. And most importantly, one of the things that we definitely want to make sure happens is that we score the fat. That will actually help render out all that flavor and help get all the flavors of everything we're cooking into the meat itself. All right. Now that we have this all set, we're going to start adding our other ingredients. So we have some diced onion, garlic, and a little jalapeno. Now I just crushed the garlic and I just quartered the jalapenos. The fact is what we're after is the pork. We're going to get all the flavor from all this mirepoix that we're adding in. We're going to use that to kind of puff up our pork. This is roasted pepper puree. I'm going to just pour that right over top. This is literally nothing more than just a little bit of roasted peppers, a little bit of water, and cider vinegar. Traditionally, I would be using a ton of citrus with this. There would be some tomato in this, and that's not what we're going to do. We need to keep this low in potassium so that way anyone who's on dialysis and everybody can eat and enjoy it. All right. Get that in there. All right, last but not least, we're actually going to take our cilantro. And like I said, nothing on this is really chopped down really fine. We really just kind of want to get the flavor into the meat. We're going to start with now this is 4 cups of chicken stock. We're actually going to be using probably a couple cups to start, and as it cooks and as it reduces, we're just going to add a little bit more and a little bit more. The skin is going to get nice and crisp, and we'll take a look and see what this looks like when we pull it out in 4 hours. There we go, that's about 2 cups. And we're putting this directly into a 325-degree oven. And we're just going to let that go. And now we're going to get into our arepas. Okay, so I have about here a cup of corn flour that's been cured in lime. It's maseca or masa arepa. I'm going to mix that with some butter. Okay, traditionally this is done with like a pork lard or something of that nature. We're just going to use a little bit of butter. And we're going to slowly add some water. So we're just making a quick dough out of this. We're not doing anything super extensive. This is a great thing that you can make your dough ahead of time. It freezes very, very, very well. And we have more than enough moisture in here at this point. You could see how the fat's all combined into that. Yeah. So this is a nice soft dough. We could tighten it up. We could add a little bit more masa if we have to. Give it a few minutes and we're going to let the corn sit and absorb. So while we're letting our dough rest for a few minutes, we're going to make our mojo. Now mojo is traditionally done with bitter orange and lime with a little bit of olive oil and garlic. We're not using any lime, we're not using any bitter orange, we're not using any of that. We're actually going to use cider vinegar instead. I personally prefer Bragg's. It's nice, it's mellow, has a great flavor. And we're going to start with canola oil. Approximately about half a cup canola oil. And a good amount of garlic. A mojo is a garlic-based sauce. Can be used in marinades. Okay, and as you can see, we're just going to let this sit here and start to toast up. We don't want to do this at too high a heat because we don't want to risk burning it. And we're just going to let that go for the moment. And now we're going to add just a little bit of ground cumin. And a little dry cilantro. Fresh you could definitely use, goes a long way. I personally, for this, I like dry because it'll actually rehydrate and you don't need to use a ton. Plus I don't have to worry about the color bleeding in. You can smell the rawness starting to cook out of the garlic. It's almost like we're frying the garlic, but we're going to add the cider vinegar to cool it down at the end. It'll emulsify nicely and make a nice sauce. Oh yeah. As you can see, our garlic is actually starting to brown. We're starting to get a little bit of color. It's starting to give a little bit of a stick. And you can it still smells a little bit raw. You can actually smell the pungent odor of garlic actually starts to go away as it toasts off in the oil and mellows. Okay, now that we have our garlic 100% toasted off, okay, it's starting to stick to the bottom. It's nice and hot. We're going to add our cider vinegar to it. Whip it together and just set it aside and let it steep. The heat from the oil is going to continue to cook off the garlic. It's going to have a nice mellow flavor to it. Now, at the same time, we're actually going to get our dessert started also, okay? We're doing a rice pudding. We're going to top it with coconut. We're not actually going to put any coconut into the rice pudding mix as it stands because coconut on its own is a very high potassium item, especially the coconut milk. And this we're going to do just real simple. We're just going to take a cup of rice, and in this case, I'm just using arborio, just because of how creamy it gets. We have a little bit of Chinese 5 spice that I like to use. Now, because we are using arborio, I'm using 2 cups of water. The reason I'm not using 3 is because the 3rd cup is going to be a combination of sweetened condensed milk and regular heavy cream. That's our heavy cream. Make sure we got all of our cream out of this. And now we're going to add our sweetened condensed milk. And this is really going to add our sugar content to this. I'm going to take this nice and slow, let this come right up to a simmer. Oh yeah, okay. We're just going to sit there and let that cook. Now we're going to start to work with our arepa dough. As you can see, as it sat, it actually started to absorb more of the moisture. One of the things that I like to do for my arepas, I like to roll it out as a cylinder. It makes it immensely easier to cut down. Plus you can get right around the same size. And we're just going to smash these down nice and thin. Now they actually make presses for this, so you don't have to actually worry about that. But if you don't have a press and you just want to get it flat, use back end of spatula works. I just like pressing it by hand. Just going to give that a moment to sit. We're going to get our pan nice and hot. Now that's going to absorb a lot of oil when we start to put our arepas in here. So we want to put a good amount of olive oil. Awesome. We just want to get some nice color to this and let them just kind of cook through in the oil. We can always add more oil to it as it absorbs. Give these bad boys a flip. See how they're starting to look. Starting to crisp up. And while these guys are cooking, we're going to get these started on the other side. We're going to check our pork. Going to give this a quick stir. We want to make sure that our rice is not sticking to the bottom. And let's chuck our pork. Oh, look at that. This pork's been roasting for about 4.5 hours. Crackling, looks nice and thick on that. I barely pushed it on that, guys. Yeah, that pork is done. It's coming right apart. Check our arepas right quick. As you can see, we're starting to get some nice color on them. Some of these were a little too soft when I put them in, but that's okay. Still going to cook up nice, light, and crisp. All right. Our pork is ready to go. We have our sauce. Our arepas are going. And what we have here is a little bit of cotija cheese. Now this is a semi-soft, drier cheese. It's a Mexican cheese. And it's named cotija for the region that it's from. And that's what we're going to use to garnish our arepas with. Okay, so our pork's out. Our arepas are all cooking. Start to pull some of these off. Awesome. Let's grab a plate, start to plate this up. So we have our pork arepas. Okay, these are our corn arepas. Toasted off. We'll add one more to this. And then we have our pork, and this pork, let me tell you something. Where it's crisp is the exterior. Now, if anybody likes the pork fat, this is gold. And this is just delicious. This is still really hot and fresh out of the oven. So instead of trying to shred it by hand, I'm just going to chop it down a little bit. Because yes, it is that hot. And this is going right over top of our arepas. We have our mojo. All nice, fresh, toasted garlic. Just smell everything come together on this. This is going to help keep things nice and moist. It's also going to bring out all the flavors of the pork. And the arepas underneath are going to be a really nice conduit for everything. Of course, last but not least, the cotija cheese. All right. You could finish this off. You can add more cilantro to it. You could do a ton of different things. But we're keeping it nice and basic so that way you guys can play with it later. That's our pork arepas, and we got another few minutes waiting on our rice to finish cooking down. Hey guys, let's get into our rice pudding. So we've been cooking this for about a half hour, 45 minutes or so. And as it sits, it's going to get thicker. So there's two ways you can serve this. You could actually serve rice pudding warm. You can serve it cold also. It all depends on personal preference. Me personally, when it's fresh like this, freshly cooked, I like serving it nice and hot. Before we start with that, now, though coconut itself is really high in potassium, I still like to have a little bit of that crunch and a little bit of that flavor. So we're actually going to top with little golden raisins. I have some shredded coconut here that I'm about to toast off real quick, just in a warm saute pan. And notice, I didn't put any oil in there. There's enough natural oil in the coconut itself that should release real nice. But you could definitely smell the cinnamon, you could smell all the spice, you could smell the vanilla, and I'm sure it tastes just as good. We'll find out in a moment. We're just going to remove this from the heat and stir it just to get a little bit of the heat out of it. You could use a bowl, personally. I like using a martini glass. That way you can see everything that's in there from the sides as well as on top. There we go. You can just see how quickly that's starting to toast up. And that's what we're looking for, just a little bit of color. Take our homemade warm rice pudding, fresh and hot. Add a couple of golden raisins to that. Some gorgeous toasted coconut. And just a little bit, you don't need a lot. Enjoy. Thank you guys so much for joining us today on Cooking Without Kidneys. I hope you had as much fun as I did making pernil, making your own arepas, as well as rice pudding. Join us next time when we do a little Asian. Have yourself a great night and a great day.